That doesn't have anything to do with this. You're still an abomination for liking coleslaw.
No, you are! Hello and welcome to House of Bards. This is the QCon 2016 podcast.
Yeah, this is post QCon post QCon 23 report.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a very, very exciting podcast where over a year after our first episode we've broken new ground because this is the first time that we're going to have a guest on the podcast. We mentioned her quite a lot last week. It's Maxi!
Hi!
Who is still in Belfast after QCon, so we thought, hey, you ran a game over QCon that was actually kind of more interesting than mine, so why don't we get you on the podcast?
And I was like, okay then, I have to write everything up then that I've done.
Because she's new and not yet jaded, and just like winging it or whatever.
Yeah. Sure, I used to be so concerned about making notes. Now I just enter every podcast in completely blind. We don't even decide what we're talking about until like 5 minutes before we record.
Yeah, that's the way. Like, I will go and look at the Wikipedia page for a class for its history if we're gonna do class studies. But other than that, it's like fuck it.
Yeah.
We're just gonna talk out of our ass for 2 hours and then I'll cut it down to an hour.
Yeah. That's why we go off topic so often.
Yeah. It's definitely the way. So yeah, some of you, many of you in fact, because as far as I know it is actually our most popular episode, which is a sort of source of great embarrassment and irritation to me, because it's nothing like the rest of the episodes, are very fond of episode 3 of this podcast, which was called the QCon 22 experiment. And it's just gone. It's been that time of year again. It was the 22nd of June now while we're recording, and it's Wednesday, so it would have been... When was QCon?
17th.
It's the 17th to the...
19th.
Okay, 17th to the 19th of June at Queen's University Belfast. And yeah, it was good. It was fun.
Yeah.
I had a good time. I ran more games than I did last year because I ran another 3 games as part of another experiment. And also, I ran Traveller once.
Mm.
Just a normal scenario written by somebody else. I changed around some of the bits to divorce it from its context, just so it would be a normal fun Traveller romp. There's not actually that much to say about that one. I had 4 people in it, which was great because I wanted to include character creation, but I didn't actually make pre-gens up to the beginning of that. But then I turned up and I found that I had instituted a limit of 4 people on that game, which means that past Alex is significantly more intelligent than present Alex in all respects. I was glad that had happened. So I tried, guys. I really, really tried to think of some way of topping the experiment from last year. But when you start with organising literal time travel, it's kind of difficult to know where to go next. So the theme of the experiment this year was past, present, future. And I decided that the way it worked was the first group were going to build the dungeon. And the second group were going to hide loot around the dungeon. And then the third group could come in and run the dungeon like a normal dungeon crawl. And I thought that would be interesting. And indeed it was. It was a reasonably big success, the experiment this year. So I called it the Magnian Vault Trilogy. The idea being that it would be centered around a dwarven vault cut into Mount Magnia, and that would be the thing. So the first group would be thousands of years before the current Dawn Somber continuity. A queen would commission a vault where the riches of the dwarf kingdom could be stored, and they would have to build it, and they would come across a trouble along the way. But something that I found very interesting with that was I hadn't expected my players to have such enthusiasm for the collective architecture like, you know, the whole like you guys need to work together to like come up with a design for this dungeon thing. I thought that would be kind of like I didn't expect it to be boring to them, but I thought it would be something that they would find kind of weird and that they wouldn't really take to, and that they'd just sort of like, you know, come up with some reasonably workable ideas for some rooms and leave it at that. But it seemed like they were actually like really into that, and they even like went as far as thinking about the superficial like aspects of their characters and what their characters would think was like good, being a good architect. It was funny because I gave them 5 objectives. I said, you have to complete any 3 of these objectives, and you can, if you wish, complete all 5 of them. So it was, there needed to be a big hall where dwarf lords could have like statues erected of them and have their masterworks displayed. There needed to be a big state vault room that was just like a pile of money like you might see Scrooge McDuck dive into. There needed to be a throne room where there would be like a big throne. There needed to be a library where valuable books could be stored, and there needed to be 8 personal vaults for rich families in the in the kingdom. And one of the players, who was playing a barbarian, decided that they were going to do the first 3 because, quote unquote, books are for nerds and fuck the bourgeoisie. So that was that. Then they built the first 3 and they left the other ones alone, especially after having encountered some mummies while digging into the rock face and having to deal with those mummies who had been entombed there in a box. And so like when with the second group, I was like, okay, this is like a very exciting historical time. This is the final days of the old dwarf kingdom. The king has been corrupted. He's turned cruel and evil, and he's oppressing his citizens. Yashvaram, the baby-faced dwarf lord, has broken away from the king and openly defied the monarchy, and is taking his big train of dwarvish and human refugees to the east to found a new country. So what you have to do is you're agents of Yashvaram, and you have to go to the vault at Mount Magnia, take it over, hide a bunch of treasure in it, and then defend it from the forces of the king. And like they were pretty interesting as well, actually, because they talked their way out of 2 consecutive confrontations before they actually had to see combat, which I was not expecting them to do at all. Like the first confrontation is 3 Dragonborn bandits appear, and like within the context of like the canon at this point, like Dragonborn have only existed for roughly 200 years, and they don't really have much of a claim to land of their own. So they're very protective of their territory in the mountains, and they're like, you're trespassing, you're too close to our tribal like village. There's no like dwarf lands up here. You need to turn around and go, or we're going to kill you. And they managed to talk to... They used the sorcerer a spell to make the leader like them, and they managed to resolve that one non-violently. And then when they got to the vault, they broke through the first 2 doors, and then when they opened the third one, there's this really angry dwarf who's there. Who are you, and why are you trying to get in? And they're like, we're your relief. And because of like their shared high charisma, this actually worked. They managed to convince the group of dwarves who were guarding the vault that this ragtag band of ununiformed dwarves, half-elves, and humans was their relief. And it was just like, it couldn't all be dwarves because of like bureaucracy and cutbacks and whatever. And they're just like...
those migrants stealing those dwarf jobs.
They're just like
this is why we should leave the humanoid alliance in the referendum.
But yeah, they managed to just convince them to leave, without really arousing too much suspicion. And like obviously those guys turned around once they found like the contingent of the royal army that was coming, and was like, "No, you fools! what did you do?" But then they set to work hiding. What were they given? They were given Queen Ashzar's crown. Cassia's Skybook, which is a Dwarf Lord artifact I use a lot in my games. It's a book that accurately mathematically details the movements of the stars for, I think, 400 years after Cassia died, and can be used to derive the movements of the stars thereafter. Just because, like, it becomes like an important plot point at certain times during the main continuity, but I wanted to show that, like, the dwarves were interested in crafts beyond, like, just making big hammers and suits of armor and whatever.
Yeah.
That, like, Cassia's masterwork, like, it's a really well made book and it's really well bound and it will last a long time, but the reason why it's valuable is because the information contained within is completely mathematically accurate. And there was a staff which was some other dwarf lord that I've mentioned before, like, it belonged, there was the masterwork of that dwarf lord. There was also a huge amount of gold and some diamonds the size of your fist. I think 5 of them they had to hide. And they got really creative with how they were hiding some of these. I think the book ended up inside a hole cut in another larger book in the library, which is not too silly. The money ended up just in the Ash family vault. The crown was stuffed into the concentric roll of a rolled up carpet. The staff and the diamonds were actually put inside granite statues in the entrance hall, because I think it was the cleric who used
You said meld stone when you told me?
Meld through stone, and he would just, like, push himself in. And I ruled that, like, you can put stuff inside these statues, but the displaced material will make the rest of the statue denser. So if you make the statue too dense, it will just sort of explode. Basically, it will, like, crumble to dust because it will be compressed too much. So they spread the stuff around the statues, but you would have to break the statues in order to get them out, or at the very least meld through stone again, which I thought was really clever. And then they defended the vault against 30 dwarves and a stone giant, and it was quite brutal actually. The sorcerer burned an entire contingent of dwarves alive. It was pretty horrible. And then I was just like, okay, they're all dead, so I guess you succeeded. And that's where Maxi's group comes in, because they were the third group.
Yeah.
And they're just gonna, like, run this as a normal dungeon, because this is, like, hundreds of years later when because the vault was basically abandoned after the second game, so, like, it's still got, like, all the doors smashed in from where the stone giant has just been, like, smashing, like, through the vault doors, and it's full of, like, you know, skeletons and stuff like that. So you guys came to, like, through the front door, and where, like, all of those dwarves were incinerated. What did you find?
We found a flaming skull that leapt up and started cackling at us, and so we immediately went into combat with the skull, took it out. It took a lot of our hit points down, and we smashed it to pieces. And then on some checks, we realized that given enough time, the skull would reform. So we got 2 bags. We put the bone fragments and divided them between the bags and threw them in different directions off the mountain before continuing on inside.
That's fucking brutal.
It's a good idea, though.
It is, but
like,
brutal.
Those of you who've listened to a Halloween episode will probably remember us talking about the Flame Skull, and, like, you do have to deal with those guys, because it's like dispel magic or remove curse you have to have in order to get rid of them for good. So, lacking either of those options, I thought their idea was pretty decent. It would take that skull a while to put itself back together.
Crawl up that mountain, you bitch.
I like the idea of it attempting to reform itself together, but the 2 bags are sandwiched between it.
That would be funny, actually, if, like, it's two bags, like, flying in the air, and it's just, like, got as close as it can get, so there's this, like, imprint of, like, a skull inside the bag going... Although, to be honest, if it were able to get close enough to reform itself, it would probably just, like, go on fire and burn through the bags.
Yeah.
So maybe it would, like, have, like, seams in it, and the seams would have, like, fragments of burnt Hessian in them.
Yeah.
That'd be funny. Actually, it wouldn't be funny, it would be fucking terrifying.
Yeah, it's still a skull on fire.
Yeah.
But it was gonna allow us to do what we needed to, instead of only giving us a half an hour or an hour before it reformed?
I think it's within an hour.
Yeah, within an hour.
So then they go into this entrance hall where they find the granite statues, and by the way, this all the way through here, these statues have been made out of the granite that came from the granite box containing the mummies that was found in the first adventure. And these mummies were imprisoned in this granite box because they were cultists. They were servants of Ataramatsu, the demon who's locked in a pocket dimension but wants to come out and genocide all the living races of the world and turn them into his undead thralls so that he can make war on Skedrenth and Tanither and become the leader of all demons and devils and also the god of death. So he has a cult, but not a lot of people like him, and in this case, these mummies were considered so dangerous that elves decided to lock them up in a box inside a mountain, and then because there was no way out of the box, there was this sort of dish in the middle of the original box that was where those final elves who did finished the ceiling just went and blew themselves up completely so that their bodies couldn't be used by the mummies to swell their ranks. Players in that first game were subjected to my extremely limited and moderately carefully researched attempts at terse Latin phrases, because I think I mentioned before that Elvish in my world is based on Latin, and I wanted it to be that these elves, these mummies, were so old that they only knew Elvish. So they said, I don't know the word. The one I can remember is tibies dissimilabile, which is the closest that I could get to something that one might say to announce an intent to make a victim like one of themselves, because that was their thing, is they touch you and then you slowly start turning into a mummy, but not like a bandages mummy. It's more that you just sort of dry out and dehydrate until you become like a walking corpse. And tibies dissimilabile literally means you will be or can be assimilated, because that was the phrase that I found that when you pass it through Google Translate and then you pass it back again, there's the least amount of what's the word? It was the least lossy translation I could find. Yeah. It was the meaning was retained. It was the can will distinction. I was I vaguely remember that Latin has some weird problems with that kind of construction. So I wasn't going to really let that bother me. Because this is the things, I don't know any Latin myself, but through my travails through weird aspects of literature, I've come to collect a lot of completely useless knowledge about vague rules and stuff that Latin has problems with. It's on the edge of my head, so I was it's fine.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
I, who have studied Latin for 3 years, probably know even less than you.
But no, that was fun. But then I was okay, so these statues are always evil because they're basically stained with the evil of the mummies having seeped into the stone. So they make everyone who goes near them and tries to stone sense them, which happened a lot because a lot of the player characters were dwarves, really uncomfortable, which was very funny. But you guys didn't get very far though, did you? You went into this room and you looked around for stuff to loot. And that was when the bagpipes came in.
Yes.
There was a necklace, and I'm going to have to explain the bagpipes joke. So we mentioned Matt as well last week, and this I built this with Matt in mind, but I think it's a thing that comes up quite a lot for any player. Is if you have a reasonably high magic setting, your players will want to go to magic shops to get magical items. And a lot of the time, when they do such things, they accept that such items will probably be very expensive, because obviously you have to balance the way that magic works in your setting somehow. But they want to go and they want to browse, and I'm Matt, can you please stop doing this? Because making up magical items on the fly is actually reasonably difficult. Especially balanced ones that won't wreck the game.
See, this is why I just strand you out in the middle of the wilderness half the time. There
Yeah.
aren't any fucking magic shops in the mountains, bitches.
But what I ended up doing is, if you look in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there is actually a set of tables that, are used, that you can use at least for making magical items. And
It's true.
They have a bunch of adjectives that mean certain things, and they generally have like an explanation. So you can reference those tables. And I thought, well, I could write it. Like I am a programmer of some little skill. I could write an applet to just make random items, like random magical items.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. I got like all of the weapons from the weapons table, and I think the armor as well. And I got all these tables from the DMG. I got like all of the groups of people who could make an item. I tweaked it for my world, so I think I removed Drow and I added Galliena because Galliena is known for having like made a couple of items as well, so I wanted her to be in there. That kind of thing. And I added like all of these adjectives, and because I was worried about like names, I actually like spent a decent amount of time getting it to write like a rudimentary name generator, like giving it some rules to follow about when to put in consonants and when to put in vowels, and like whether it wanted to include like the high fantasy apostrophe or a hyphen somewhere in the name, and whether the name was actually like the name of the artifact or whether it was the like dagger of Trixus or something like that. But when I'd done that, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. This will be a thing that I can just like run a couple of times every time Matt wants Silas to go and browse in a magic shop. But I feel like there are other tables of items that I could add to it. And so I went and I like found all the tables of like miscellaneous items as well.
Yeah.
Things like rings and like so there's jewelry, and then there was also like I think the junk table as well. And then I came across the table of musical instruments available to bards. And I put that in as well. And suddenly, like, I feel like it was actually working correctly, but it's possibly just the inherent ridiculousness of the thing. Is suddenly I was perceiving this machine as spitting out like hundreds of like magical sets of bagpipes. And it was the funniest shit ever. So like when I was just stuck off the top of my head for oh god, like what's a masterwork that a dwarf would come up with? I was like, bagpipes. Some dwarf lord, sometime in prior history, made a really well made, like always in tune, possibly magical set of bagpipes, and that is in this box here. That's what that is.
You've no idea how much I appreciate your idea of this randomizing of magic stuff and weapons and armor, because I am so sick of there only ever be magical swords in campaigns. Because like sometimes, what about a magical quarterstaff or a sickle or something like that?
Or a magic set of bagpipes.
Yes.
I'm kind of pissed off actually that I wrote it in Java, which is quite difficult to stick up on the net in any kind of accessible form. So I might remake it in JavaScript and see if I can get it hosted for you all to use. But in the meantime, the tables that I used are still in the Dungeon Master's Guide. Like you can go and look them up in the index, and I think they're a reasonably good resource for just on the fly making up magic items when one needs to like come up at some point. Because I think I tend to forget about magic items. Like, when the party start leveling with, like, stuff that has resistance to non-magical weapons, I'll sort of, like, slowly switch them all over to magical weapons, and then I'll forget about magical items again until somebody goes into a magic shop. So, like, being able to make all of these, like, magical legendary items. Like, there's one that I've promised is going to turn up in your campaign, just because I really, really love the name it generated, which is the Amulet of Ooh. Which I believe is like some kind of amulet that has something to do with languages, like allowing you to translate languages. Or possibly like that's what I said that it should be like because of the name or something like that. But no, definitely that is where that joke comes from. And then you fought a hill giant and you decided to cut your losses and run away because like it was approaching the end of the session time.
Yeah, which is really unfortunate.
It was pretty unfortunate because they didn't find any of the things that they were sent in to find. And they knew about them because like the legend was like these things were lost in the vault and never found. But a hill giant like was 1 challenge rating above the party, so like you were reasonably lucky in killing it, and then you were like, let's just grab some gold from this trough in the throne room and be done with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think my character gave us a good head start on the giant, at least.
Oh, you tripped him over, didn't you?
Yeah, I threw a rope towards the thief, and who was hiding behind a pillar, and I was hiding behind the other pillar, and the giant was lumbering towards us, and I was just like, pull it taut with me. And I think you just rolled really badly.
He rolled like ridiculously badly, and actually he rolled so badly that I was like, the giant trips over the rope before you even have a chance to like pull it taut around his ankles. He just like stubs his toe on it and goes right on his face because it was that bad. Like hill giants do not have good means to make dex saves, but wow, he rolled badly.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping on.
I think that's me because I kind of talked about like the Traveller game beforehand. I mean, I really love QCon. I helped like do some of the packing up in the RPG section this year, and we got to talk to this guy who was GMing a game. From what I could tell, like his game premise seemed to be the cast of Dad's Army fight Cthulhu. And like we got to talk to him because like we were waiting on him to like finish packing his stuff up so that we could like fold up his tables and you know like get all the chairs stacked or something. And like we asked him how it went, and he said it actually went really well. But I was really concerned initially because there were some people who had never seen Dad's Army, and there were some people who had never played Call of Cthulhu. Indeed, there were some people who had never role-played before, and as far as like the latter goes, I'm a veteran of this concept, I suppose now, and I was like, it worked fine, didn't it? And he was like, yeah, absolutely. They had a really good time. They did a lot of entertaining things. He was actually reasonably prepared. He had, I think he actually like had the characters from the show as like pre-gens in Call of Cthulhu. So he had like little name plaques that had the "you have been watching" thing from Dad's Army. Yeah. I was like, oh, so like this isn't just a him doing a gimmick game because he was like, wouldn't that be funny? Like he's put some effort into it. And to be honest, it's not that silly an idea.
No.
Yeah, I would totally watch. That really should have been the Dad's Army movie. I mean,
oh my god.
I agree with Beth.
Who are you kidding, Mr. Cthulhu?
But yeah, like I was really happy to see stuff like that because I feel like quite a lot of like similar conventions will have this happen. But the thing I really love about QCon is when you're running an RPG and somebody turns up to your table, like RPGs are in high demand. Like I remember Andrew told us that there were more people who wanted to sign up than there were spaces on RPGs being run.
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is simultaneously like very flattering and also kind of worrying.
Yeah.
Because like there were people like, but the thing is like, if somebody turns up at your table, that person has at least a passing interest in what you're trying to run. Like nobody ends up sorted into like playing D&D where they're like, I don't really want to play this game, I'm not that interested in it, or something like that. If somebody like turns up, they either know how to play D&D or they don't and they want to learn. And I think that's what I really love about it is like there's always enthusiastic people, and like even in cases where there aren't, it will be a worthwhile experience because if somebody at the end is like, okay, well I've tried it and I did my best and I like what you're trying to do, but I don't think this is for me, and I'm like, that's fine, that's cool. This is the perfect environment for you to make that discovery. Like, yeah, I think actually maybe I should say that is like if there's a similar convention near you. I mean, obviously it would take us like all day and significantly longer than even this podcast that I might let like extend past our normal hour 15 maximum like would take to explain exactly what QCon is like. But definitely like if there's a similar such convention like near you that does do really any kind of role-playing game. Like, to be honest, even LARPing. Like, Maxi, you played in a LARP at QCon, didn't you?
I do LARP, yeah. I LARPed last year too. And gotta say, most fun I've ever had, honestly.
It's like trying new things, because that's the thing. It's like everybody who comes to that table is going to be just like somebody who's come out from the crowd in the con and wants to try that thing, and people will run like weird experiments and self-contained things that are easy to pick up. And there might be organised play there. I remember at QCon they always have the Pathfinder Society, which is like the D&D Adventurers League, but for Pathfinder. I played in it once. I didn't really like it, but that showed me that I'm not that fond of Pathfinder. I mean, Becca's like been running Pathfinder in her game, and I've kind of warmed to the system there, but I'm also really not fond of organised play. Like, that was 2 valuable discoveries that I made like last year as to, you know, okay, this is my thing.
Well, this year it was my first time playing Call of Cthulhu, and a completely new experience for me. And I've been doing RPGs for since I was 18, and it was great. I had a lot of time, and if there's anything I can say to someone who wants to try something new, especially at a convention, then no one is there to see you fail at anything. They want you to have a good time. They want you to come away with something positive, and they will help you through the things that are completely unclear. They just want you to enjoy yourselves, and they'll always be there to, if you're like not clear on a certain rule or you don't exactly know what you're doing, that's fine. They'll just be there.
At the very least, mind, the people who are running games there want to have a good time, and they rely on you to help them have a good time as well. And most of the people who are doing that, they want even more than that. They know that this is their opportunity to advertise either the hobby itself or their particular little corner of it that they're running, or like their capacity to give other people an enjoyable time, or just to test that. Like, I know definitely the thing that I love so much about QCon is like the number of people who have never played a role-playing game, or have never played D&D specifically, or have played D&D but have never played the edition of D&D that we're playing, or have never played like Traveller, because I ran Traveller this time, and I had one guy who'd played Mongoose Traveller before, which was the edition I was running, and one guy who'd played Traveller a very, very long time ago, but not Mongoose Traveller, and 2 guys who had never played the system before, but thought it looked interesting. And I'm like, okay, so this is what is good about Traveller, and this is what I didn't like really want to leave out, because like that's why I left character creation in to my Traveller experience, because like in my opinion, that's one of the best bits of the system, and I wanted to showcase to people who might be new to it, like, this is what I really, really love about this game. And I think a lot of the time, at QCon especially, and I think at similar conventions, that's what people are trying to do. And because they're trying to like exude that, they're invested in the idea that you should be having a good time. And they're also invested in the idea that you might not be familiar with the material that they're trying to introduce you to beforehand. Like, in some cases, they're potentially counting on it. So, really, like, do not think, oh, I'd kind of like to do that, but I've never really played that sort of thing before. Like, no. This is the event where you've never played that sort of thing before, and you go and you play it.
Absolutely.
Like, definitely. I remember what I always do, and what is a generally good idea, if you're not doing the thing where, like, character creation is one of the best parts of the game and you want to showcase it, is I make pre-generated characters at the right level for the scenario, and I'm just like, okay, here are a bunch of characters. They have all of their stats set up, or most of their stats set up. You need to choose a name, and in some cases, an alignment for one of these pre-gens. So just pick one. And what I tend to do is I make 8 pre-gens, because I run games with a maximum of 6 players, and I don't want like the last person to turn up and be like, oh, well, I kind of didn't want to play this class, but it's the only pre-gen left, so I guess I have to. I'm like, no, okay, you have at minimum a choice of 3. I know that you didn't do that, Maxi, because you were like struggling to even make 7.
Yeah,
I can't
because
believe you ran a game with 7 players.
I know. I guess it's because I'm used to games being between 4 and 6, and I always kind of like feel like maybe one person could like probably squeeze in there. And
I remember the first time I ran a game, I was kind of like that as well. I think I had like 8 people at the table, and it was fine. But you know, there's definitely, I think, nothing wrong with that compulsion at cons like that to be like, oh no, put the limit up as high as we can because I want as many people as possible to have fun and to like be provided with that. Like, I think it's a compulsion you kind of have to resist, but I don't think there's anything wrong with it as a compulsion. I think it's a very good and healthy thing to like want to introduce people to the hobby in like a non-judgmental way where it's like, no, this is an opportunity for you to try new things, and that's what I love about QCon, and like that's my outlet to do that kind of thing now, and it has been for 2 years now. It's just I love it, and I love it when like after the game people are like, I had a really good time, or even when people are like, well, I didn't really enjoy myself, but now I know, and I'm like, no, that's cool. That was potentially one of the outcomes. Is that now you know, right? And you don't have to bother with it again. But you tried. And you tried in an environment where you trying doesn't have like any consequences beyond this. You can leave the convention hall and never go and play a game of D&D again. And like now you know, that's fine. That's cool. Like I love just that stuff. Oh god, I just really love people. It's so good. Yes, right. Maxi ran a game as well. Maxi, was this your first time DMing at QCon?
This is my first time DMing at a con.
All right, so you only ran one game.
Yeah.
And I remember like before QCon, you had like a short list of scenario titles. Did you actually have like the scenarios behind these titles like written up when you asked me to make the choice? Or did you just have like the vague ideas?
I had the idea, but I hadn't done any of the maps yet.
Oh, right, so like a lot of the beef then was still like waiting to be made.
Yeah, I suppose I was most prepared for the ones that were of the investigatory sort, because those are the ones that I guess were more interesting to me instead of just the pure dungeon crawls, which I was willing to run if anyone was interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
But
so, like, you, I think you presented me with like 4 titles and said, like, which of these should I run at QCon? And I think we did it by process of elimination because I was like, Maxi should do something that is interesting that would fit into the time slot because you'd be running. I think you knew that you wanted to run reasonably late, right?
Yeah.
Like, maybe not as late as the final time slot in the con, but like reasonably late. So like it has to be short to fit in the time. It has to be intensive because you got to get a lot of really interesting content into a very small amount of time. Which means that you want something that doesn't really like leave like too many questions open and stuff like that. And ideally, and this was I suppose my ulterior motive, I was like, Maxi's thing should be as different from mine as possible, so that like there's the least amount of competition overlap between us. Because then we're both sure to get like players. As it is, that was not relevant at all because loads of people came wanting to play D&D, and as I remember, like I was told my games like were the first ever to fill up.
Yeah.
But that was just the case also for like all of D&D and Pathfinder. Like everybody wanted to play those games, and then after that, like the more esoteric games would fill up as well because the whole RPG section was almost at capacity, as far as I know.
Mm-hmm.
So. The end of the shortlist, I was like, you should run the Little Shop of Sparks. So, do you want to tell us about the Little Shop of Sparks then, Maxi?
Well, the Little Shop of Sparks is the whole game was one of the first games that I'm running in my own world that I've been building for on and off for the past year, and I'm running a campaign at the minute which isn't set in my world, and so I'm just working on it behind the scenes, and occasionally I will do one-shots in it. So I set the scenario in one of my cities, Matoth, which is the City of Storms. And the whole deal of the story was that the Little Shop of Sparks is a shop that is affectionately nicknamed as such by the denizens of Matov's Candela Quarter. Because of its frenzied late night activities where all through the night sparks can be seen coming from the windows, because everyone in the quarter knows that it is the residence of the amateur scientist and shopkeeper Olagus Fen, a amiable blue dragonborn who doesn't always have the best time when it comes to inventing things. I guess Arthur Weasley kind of inspired me a little bit with his personality. He was designed to be a very sort of sweet character. Well, the whole story revolves around the fact that he's gone missing and has been missing for 3 weeks. The residents of the Candela Quarter have noticed that the shop has gone completely dark during the night, so there's no activity that they would normally associate with the shop coming from it at all. And in the morning, people are emerging from the shop, pale and withdrawn and having no memory of ever entering the shop or what happened in there. And also, they were never witnessed to have entered the shop in the first place. But these people are of all different ages and genders and different races, and there's no similarities between them whatsoever, except for the fact that they just cannot remember anything about the shop. And also, some of them are residents of the city, while some of them are from different parts of the world, even different continents, once they're able to piece together their own mindset again. So the whole story starts that the denizens have been asking around for help, and that's where the party comes in, because the denizens don't want to go in the shop. So why not send in a group of adventurers in there to see if they can sort it out for them. The thing about this is that I decided to do something interesting as well, where I would give each of my player characters an ulterior motive for going into the shop. I would give them their own individual quest that I would hand them at the start of the game. So I've got my list here of people who attended. So we have Philip, who played Alec Longstaff, who was a half-elf cleric. And his ulterior motive was he had an enchanted card which he was told to hide somewhere in the shop. Then I had Gareth, who played the human thief Cooper. His ulterior motive was to find a black dragon scale and steal it. I had Jacob, who played, admittedly my favourite sort of pre-gen. He was Craig, the gnome fighter. Because, as Alex will attest to you, I have a fascination of small characters who can pack one hell of a punch. And it goes back to the time of Little Bear, the halfling who was... I
remember Little Bear, yeah.
Yeah.
It's our friend
Richard.
Yes, Richard he played quite a lot of scrappy halflings in the time that he played with us,
but they were very tough. They had an amazing strength capacity and would always scream incoherently and run into battle whenever he saw it.
That's not always the case, because he played that druid halfling who hid in backpacks.
Oh yeah,
and was essentially a sort of like turret because he had a sling. So he would pop out of the backpack and then he would just be like a sort of covering the back of the person. But no, Little Bear I think was his most famous creation, and he was a fighter halfling in AD&D. And in AD&D, provided you got a high strength score, a fighter was not the worst thing that a halfling could be. They weren't unsuited to the class, but they definitely it wasn't an optimal build. So you could really see how he loved making scrappy halflings.
Well, Craig, the gnome fighter, had an 18 for his strength, and the player actually came up to me afterwards and said he ran a Dragonborn paladin with only 17 strength earlier, which was amusing. And his ulterior motive was he had to pour a purple vial, if he should find it, on a smooth crystalline stone. Then we had
Could
Leah.
could that be like any crystalline stone, or was there a specific one inside that they knew was inside the shop that they wanted him to do that one?
That was the thing about the motives. They the motives were given to them by people who obviously knew more than they were saying, and it was really up to the players to decide under whose payroll they were actually acting on. Really,
these definitely actually sound like the kind of motives that players in my sort of campaign might be given when embarking on an unrelated quest by the Society of Quiet Protectors.
This also sounds like the sort of bullshit Lady M comes up with. So
oh yeah, Lady M also would do that kind of thing. So I think like all three of us love this idea of sort of tertiary interests, third parties who know more than they let on.
So we had Leah, who played Alora, the Wood Elf Bard. And she was actually, her ulterior motive was, I think, the one that you could easily identify with, that she had to decide whether or not Olagus needed to be arrested. And it was up to her whether or not to find him guilty or innocent of whatever it was that was going on there, and was to file a report to her supervisors. So I guess she was like the working for the police of Mataf, or
the FBI, maybe?
Yeah.
FBB, Federal Bureau of Bards.
Then we had Brandon, who played Charlie, the human wizard. Brandon had never played before. And so
there's always one of those. I think I described one in like the first of these, the QCon 22 experiment, that there was a bard who had never played before. I love like the player who has never played before, but like once they get into it and they realize that the amount of scope that's available to them, like they really get into the swing of it, and they like was that the case in this case?
Yeah, he really enjoyed himself, and
so good.
Yeah. His ulterior motive was to find and this is the one that was very specific, find a blue and green flask of liquid that glowed intermittently and smash it.
Did you, like, Brandon, did you say his name?
Yes.
Did you deliberately give him, like, one of the most explicit and least, like, vague ulterior motives on purpose, or did he just roll that one?
I handed them out at random except for one, which I'm about to get onto in a second.
So it just happened to be that he got one that would be reasonably easy to understand for like somebody who was maybe not that confident with like what was going on. Okay, cool.
Then I had two players, Peter and Stephen, who I can't exactly remember which characters they played, but I have their characters' names, what they were. So one of them played Diz, the half-orc druid, and he had to find an interesting scroll or notes that would be considered valuable, like blueprints of something within the shop that he could perhaps sell to the highest bidder. Again, it was entirely up to him what his character would want interesting notes for. And then one of them played Gurmas, the dwarf monk. And this is the one who I deliberately saved the character objective, because I did not want the druid to get it, because it was literally protect the druid. Under all circumstances, protect the druid was his ulterior motive. So that was all of them. And
sorry, Peter and Stephen, were they related? Was this the infamous Hand brothers? Because I had them in one of my games as well. In fact, I had them in two of my games because they were both in, I think, my first game, and then Peter came back to play in my Traveller game as well.
I have no idea.
I'm pretty sure, because Diz was a character name that I remember being in one of my games, that they probably are. It was definitely like, they weren't identical or anything, but they definitely looked like each other. So
okay.
Peter, I am sure, would have been the Peter that I knew. Stephen may have been his brother. I don't quite remember.
Well, the game started with everyone gathered outside of the shop, and they'd drawn quite a crowd because everyone was really curious to see what's going to happen to these guys when they go in and if they get out. So they do the smart thing and they ask the locals about what's been going on, how long this has been going on for. They asked for information about Olagus. If anyone worked with him, they found out he had an assistant, a half-elf lady called Terry with an eye. And they asked about the people leaving it and how long Olagus had lived and worked in. Just simple questions to get a feel for it. Then they decided to go to the makeshift hospice that had been recently set up by a cleric from the Temple District for the people who were coming out of the shop every morning with the pale, withdrawn features that they were having, and were taking care of them. So they went to see her, ask her some questions. Alec, the cleric, attempted to heal one of the patients. It had little effect on the patient other than to alleviate the sweating a little bit. They asked about the patient's condition, and then they left and returned to the shop. Then they decided to see if there were any other ways into the shop. They went behind it, and they found doors to a cellar. I think Charlie was able to detect magic coming from the seams and the gaps within the doors. And the door had a heavy chain around it and was padlocked, and they did a perception check and saw that it was rarely used. It was quite rusted over time. And they all noticed a bunch of people like watching them from the sidelines, and it was Alora who got a very high perception check and saw that these people were betting on who was going to die first, which caused the dwarf to get rather annoyed with these betters and attempted to confront them, and they skulked off and left. So finally, after doing all the outside checks, they went into the shop. Cooper opened the door and pressed himself up against the side wall in case of a trap, which was he continues to do, but it becomes very amusing later on when someone tries to copy him, and I'll tell you later on. So they enter the shop and they look around, and they find clockwork, life-sized soldiers that have been erected in stands, and they have a look at them, and they see that their power outlets have been blown out with magic, and they're in very poor condition. Some of them have been hastily stuck together with an adhesive tree sap, and they found some notes pertaining to their construction and how they were built, and also Olagus's fumbled way of writing about them, of all the different things that he was trying to get them to work and was failing at it. This was where Alec fulfilled his objective. He put his enchanted card underneath the desk, and I had told the party at the very beginning that you can interfere with each other's objectives. That is totally a thing that you can do.
Well, did they know what each other's objectives were
No.
beforehand? Well,
Absolutely
so you'd have to give them information, right? Because otherwise they might do it by accident.
Yes. So they decided to check the first floor, which was just a living space. They didn't find anything of real interest. But then they decided to check out the attic. In the attic, they found a bunch of crates covered by sheets, and two human-sized figures covered by sheets. This caused a lot of paranoia and tension, and they very gingerly took off the sheets and found a humanoid skeleton strung up on like a medical skeleton. So it was strung up like that. And then a dragonborn skeleton strung up in a similar manner. Then they made a perception check, and the thief, Cooper, was able to hear the dragonborn skeleton breathing very, very raspily, and upon closer inspection was absolutely convinced he could hear the skeleton calling for help. Already the group are very concerned and very frightened. So they all I think one of them says, "We'll come back and help you, we promise," and then headed downstairs. So they were left with the problem that, the main problem is that they'd found cellar doors, but they couldn't find the cellar. So, after looking around, they were able to spot a flask on a shelf that was full of a solid liquid, and were able to basically find out that this was a mechanism to open the back wall. And they pulled it, and they opened the door downstairs into a corridor. So they all headed down to this corridor, and they found a room full of alchemical things. Just 3 tables with an assortment of alchemicals, and notes were everywhere. And they managed to find, in their coupled search, some of the notes were Olagus's, but some of them were not written in his handwriting at all. Then they moved on to the next room, where they found 5 massive levers. That was all that was in this room, 5 massive levers, each with a coloured knob on each of them. So it went blue, green, red, black, and white. I can't actually remember which one they pulled first. I think it was red. And upon pulling the red one, they heard noises from the other room after watching the room that they were in shimmer for a second. The wizard, Charlie, cast invisibility and went into the other room to investigate. And they saw themselves doing everything that they had been doing previously. So already time shenanigans are happening. Charlie comes back and tells the group, and they start panicking because they are all thinking, "Oh God, we're gonna break the time and space continuum," and they immediately pull another lever. As this was their plan. Like, maybe if we pull a different coloured one, we will be able to do something. So they pulled another lever. The ceiling shimmered this time, and it began to slowly rain tangerines on them. That was it. That was
slowly. So not like a torrent of tangerines, just like a tangerine periodically every few seconds, presumably.
No, like tangerines falling like snow, basically, right, down on them, like very slowly and softly, just bouncing off them all. Then their doubles entered the room, and upon seeing each other, their doubles thankfully disappeared. You see, what I'd actually done was I had made a table for each coloured lever, and would roll a 1d8 to see which effect would actually happen.
Right.
So after the first and the second lever, they decided to pull another lever. I believe it was actually the same person pulling the lever. It was Craig. Craig, the gnome fighter, kept pulling the levers. And this time, I rolled on the table, and I took an idea that you once showed me, Beth, actually, because you remember the mushroom,
yes,
the 100 percentile.
Yeah.
I was really, really fascinated by the one where you hear the thoughts of the other people in your group, but you can only hear what they think of you. So he actually I rolled for that, and that's what he got. So I quickly then asked everyone gathered there to tell the gnome what their character thought of him, and it was incredibly hilarious because the results caused the gnome to yell at the half-orc druid and just insult him. He burst into tears when he heard one of them hated his hair. He hugged the one who thought he was okay. And he was very the last person said, I love the gnome's hair. So the gnome went through what could be equated as the 5 stages of grief, I guess. Within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It was hilarious. I actually forgot to tell you what happened in the alchemical room, because one of the other players actually managed to complete their objective. Craig managed to pick up a purple vial and pour it on a crystalline stone, after which before which he was confronted about it, and the other players tried to stop him, and he lied to them and got a 20 on his deception. And so they believed him completely that this was something that he had seen happen where he comes from and that had to happen.
Alright.
And it was hilarious. So anyway, after pulling the third lever, they decided to pull another lever, because why not? So they actually did go through all 5 colours. The next lever caused the room and them to spin. Like, the room span in one way and they all span in the other way, as though they were on roller skates. And they all had to then roll to see if they managed to grab one of the other levers to keep themselves balanced. And they managed to grab the white lever last, and I think it was Cooper who pulled it. And instantly they were teleported from the room completely, and were suddenly in a void full of white spheres everywhere. Black void, but white spheres standing in nothing. So they walked up to these spheres and figured out that they could see moments not only in space, but also in time as well. Each of them were able to look into a sphere, and some of them saw a historical event, while other ones, like Cooper, saw the president of Mataf taking her morning bath, which was interesting. In any case, they didn't need to escape from there long, because the effects don't last very long. So they were instantly teleported out of there and back into the room with levers. So they decided to check out another room, and it was at this point where the I think it was the monk Gurmus decided to mock the thief by opening the door in the same way that the thief does, by opening it at the handle, then pressing himself against the wall in a paranoid way before opening the door. And it was at this point he actually triggered a trap and that sent a volley of arrows through the door, which I thought was hilarious, because then Cooper yelled at it, You see why I do this? They went in and they found a console in there, a golden console full of buttons. They decided not to mess with it after what happened in the other room, which was a shame, but at the same time, probably for the best. Then they finally went into the last room before the end, where I think most of them actually completed their objectives here. It was at this point, Alora decided that Olagus was probably innocent, especially as she was continuously finding notes that were not written in his handwriting pertaining to a plot of a diabolical nature, and that someone had taken over this shop and put Olagus and his poor assistant out of commission while they were doing God knows what there. They unfortunately didn't get a high enough roll to figure out what was going on. But Laura decided that Olagus was probably innocent. In the next room,
when Laura decides that Olagus is innocent, how many ulterior motives have been completed at this point?
3 out of 4.
Okay.
It was in this room we found another alchemical table, and this was the room where we saw a massive black dragon scale mounted on one of the tables with these magical tendril-like ropes attached to it, which were acting as like conductor cables that snaked out of the room down a corridor. It was at this point that the thief decided, now is my time to complete the objective. I've found what I'm looking for. And he proceeds to cut the ropes. And no one stops him, surprisingly. No one decides that this is a bad idea. And he succeeds in getting the Black Dragon scale and tucking it away in his backpack, which it was pretty heavy. The blue-green flask was also found in this room. And it was picked up by Craig, who decided that maybe he should give this to Charlie as the only wizard of the group to figure out what was in here. Charlie wants to destroy that flask. When Charlie got the flask, he rolled very, very low and said, "I want to drop the flask." So,
That's masterful, really.
yeah, he rolled very, very low for his inspecting of the flask. So it basically looked as if the gnome was handing over the flask and Charlie just went, "Oops," and was going to pin it all on Craig. Unfortunately, there's a little thing called whether or not anyone wants to try a dex saving throw to see if they can grab, quickly run in there and see if they can grab the flask. And I think Alora succeeded and decided to hold on to the flask. So Charlie failed his objective.
Oh no!
And now Alora still has this magical blue and green flask, which she doesn't know what it does or why it needs to be destroyed or anything.
Did Charlie proceed to try and bargain to get the flask back at any point?
Well, perhaps if we'd had more time, because at this point they decided to follow the conducting magical ropes into the corridor, which led them to the boss room, basically, where they found that the ropes were all connected to this massive dais in the back of the room, and there was a human man who was standing there, and it was at that point that we had an epic encounter. Unfortunately, there was some stuff that I had to cut out of it because the group were taking quite a long while, and so there was going to be another room that they actually entered into, which was going to be just full of magical darkness, where they had to all hold on to one another's shoulders if they wanted to go down that route and navigate themselves through it. But I had 30 minutes left, and my main villain had too many hit points for them to reasonably get him down within the time frame. So I had to cut his hit points down just a little bit, but he still did them for quite a lot of damage. It was a very epic confrontation, and it was at this point actually that Alora did something amazing. She used Shatter on which has the effect to shatter stone and objects and things like that, which caused the dais to crack. In the middle of the dais was one of the white spheres that they had seen in the void of time and space, which was increasingly growing bigger up until this point. And then when the dais cracked, it all of a sudden started to go smaller, and my villain was horrified beyond all belief and then just wanted to kill these guys completely. And
I think this was around the point where, because I was helping to tidy up at this point. I come over to you and I'm like, you've got maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah, so
it's good that they were nearly there then.
Yeah, so we got them through the end boss, and then I decided to narrate to them. They walked the way they came out of the cellar. They went upstairs. They heard movement on the first floor and went to investigate, and saw Olagus standing there with his arm round his half-elf assistant, both propping each other up, looking relieved and trying to support one another. And I think Craig, Craig's player, said, "I ship it," and I was like, okay. And they were very happy that they had been rescued, and that was the end of my scenario.
So that was them with the villain gone, them having been refleshionated.
Yes.
Yes,
That
considerably
they were
more
no longer
fleshy. 'Cause
medical skeletons.
otherwise, it's just Undertale porn. And that's my contribution to
guess.
this podcast.
Do we want to do Tuesday's game as well?
Oh,
I
yeah.
I really want to talk about Tuesday's game.
I really want you to talk about Tuesday's game, because I had a lot of fun with that one.
This can go on like we're at an hour and 20 minutes, but that's before silence cutting and before I've cut off all the bit at the beginning with like bullshit with Beth can't clap.
Beth, stop clapping.
It doesn't do work now.
All right, you go for it.
All right, so as is tradition, you're here for pretty much the whole week, right?
Yeah, I'm here till Saturday.
Okay, yeah. So Maxi's over here for a week, and as is tradition, she always comes to the
Tuesday night.
the Tuesday night Dragon Slayers when she's over. And I generally run like a one shot or something. Like occasionally I will run like an esoteric system, something that I own but I don't get to play a lot of. But in this case, I'd sort of got into the groove of making more content for my setting, having done so for for my QCon scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
I made an elf variant called the Artentumi, who are like mountain elves from a tiny little village. So something else that I've added. Some of you may remember. I don't actually know if I mentioned it on the podcast, but some of you may remember. One of the things that I didn't really allow in Dawn Somber was if you're a warlock, you can't take the Great Old One patron because there aren't any Great Old Ones because I'm not putting fucking Cthulhu in the D&D setting. That's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, when the interdimensionals turn up, they will replace the Great Old Ones and you can use them for the Great Old One thing. But there's only one of those in any continuity of the setting ever. And you probably don't want to strike a Faustian pact with him, to be honest. He's not a responsible person. Well, as a new update, that's gone. Like, maybe in the future, interdimensionals will come back as a warlock pact. But if they do, they will be a separate pact. It will all be, what is the word? It's it's for Unearthed Arcana, but players make it.
Errata?
No, not errata, because that's when wizards make it.
Okay.
Maybe it just is Unearthed Arcana. I don't know. But the point is, it will all be stuff I made up out because I'm making up a warlock patron for the Archdragons, which is an entirely separate patron. But I was like, the Great Old One patron. I actually didn't approach it from this direction at all. I am in fact lying to you. I'm lying to everybody on the podcast. I in fact do this frequently. I'm deceiving you because I have no respect whatsoever for you or your opinions. My name isn't even Alex. I lied about that. No, but
I'm shocked.
I can't
I've known you for a very long time, Alex.
I can't
Not
believe
Alex.
was bougie flagrante all along.
Or maybe my name is Alex and I'm just lying right now. You don't know. The mind games. Speaking of the mind games.
Yes.
So what I came up with was if you look at the doppelganger in the monster manual, and we talked about the doppelganger on the Halloween episode.
We did.
I was like, I don't believe that this thing is a monster indigenous to the material plane. I'm sorry, I don't. It looks like a fucking alien. And I was like, well, I don't really want to put aliens in here, but the Gith used to be aliens. They came from the Spelljammer setting. And now they're in here, the Gith and the Githzerai, they're still there. Sorry, the Gith Yankee and the Githzerai, they're all Gith, are still there, but now they live in the astral plane rather than in space. So maybe I could do something like that with doppelgangers. Maybe I could, and that's what I did. I made them come from an exoplane that's like the Feywild or the Shadowfell or the Realm of Demons, and it's called the Mansion of Mirrors. And the gist of it is that the first Great Old One in the setting, there may be more in the future, but he is the first, a being called the Ever-False King created the doppelganger race, and their whole deal is that they covet the material plane. They're jealous. that the mortal races get to, be original and have all these nice things. But like their perception of it is like viewing the material plane through frosted glass or through a camera with Vaseline rubbed on the lens. So they get a lot of stuff wrong. So the Mansion of Mirrors is like this horrible dimension where everything looks vaguely familiar, but it's like all uncanny valley. Like the people look weird. It's like if you've ever played like a Quake engine game, but the textures haven't loaded in properly, where everyone's this sort of like cauliflower-like amorphous blob. And like there'll be weird things like a dining room with too many chairs at the dining table and stuff like that. And just loads and loads of doppelgangers would come from there. And on Tuesday, I decided, okay, I have the attention span of a goldfish, so having just made up this new dimension, now I want to run a scenario set in it. So that was what I did.
Yeah, and according to Skype, it was 6 o'clock in the morning when you originally sent me the new page that you'd made on the Mansion of Mirrors.
Yeah, I sent you it, and then I decided to delete that message and send it to, like, everyone.
Yes.
So, the Mansion of Madness is where doppelgangers come from, and it's not like where doppelgangers, like, exclusively come from. It's a lot like the Feywild, in that, like, Fey live in the Feywild, but there are still loads of Fey in the material plane. Like, there are loads of, like, fairies and witches and whatever, and it's like that with the Mansion of Mirrors. Like, a lot of the time, the vast majority of the population of doppelgangers live in the Mansion of Mirrors, but there are lots of doppelgangers, like, impersonating people in the material plane. They have a very high success rate in terms of infiltration compared to, like, well, demons, for instance, who are prevented usually from entering the material plane quite strictly.
So when Alex told me he wanted to run this game on Tuesday for Dragon Slayers, I reintroduced him to a character I had made in October of last year. And he said, yes, great, that's perfect.
This was the perfect character for Maxi to run in this game. Maxi, do you want to talk about Kilvestra?
Okay, just so long as you didn't want me to spoil anything for when you were talking about it, or?
Actually, yeah, let me talk a little bit. So, there were 3 players. Rex, Niall, and Maxi. Niall made a fighter.
A human fighter, I think it was.
A human fighter named August. Rex brought a one-shot character that he had previously played in a private one-shot, where that character and a bunch of other characters fought the evil plans of a Taramaksu in a sort of and then there were none kind of deal. They like went to a house where everyone had an interest in death, and then people started getting bumped off. And he apparently came out of that a little the worse for wear.
Yeah.
Because the one stipulation that I had for everyone in this game was I was like, your character has to have a deepest, darkest existential fear. Like, what did August choose? August was...
disease.
Becoming diseased. And Rex chose for Grabthar, who was a dwarf.
Fighter, yeah.
A dwarf fighter with a hammer. Chose... He decided that since Grabthar's experiences in the horrible And Then There Were None house, he was now deathly terrified of things being incomprehensible. Like, he didn't like when things didn't make sense, and he didn't like not understanding things, because that meant that they were dangerous and they could hurt him. And I was like, oh, this character is going to have a bad time in the Mansion of Mirrors.
Yeah, absolutely. It was perfect, actually.
Yeah. Now, Calvestra, I did not need to ask Maxi for a fear, because Maxi, having already described Calvestra as a character to me, I already knew what Calvestra's fear was. And this was pretty perfect, I think.
And Calvestra was a human cleric in the life domain. So she was the healer of the 2 fighters.
And we decided everyone was going to be from Varash, didn't we?
Yeah.
So Calvestra... I think we decided on Essa, didn't we, as being her patron?
Yeah.
But she was a follower of the Kirk, so she wasn't, like, thinking of, like, a pantheon of gods. She was just...
I throw my lot in
with whoever might be able to help. Just sure, okay, I'll be a cleric of you. Which fits very well with the desperation inherent in Calvestra's character, because she has a deep, dark secret. Actually, do you want to slow roll this? Do we want to just not mention the secret until it becomes relevant to
Yeah.
the story?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So, the beginning of the story is it was a dark and stormy night, but like actually a dark and stormy night. A magical storm had fallen over Varash, like the kind that gets all the mad scientists of Varash really excited, and they go and run up their lightning conductors in preparation for the magical lightning that will bring their creations to life. And all three of these characters are staring into a mirror for some reason. Maybe they just passed by a mirror on their way through like a sheltered bazaar or something, or maybe they just have a full-length mirror in their room. I believe somebody was like cleaning their boots or something, and they needed to like use the mirror to check the.
August.
Yeah, August was cleaning his boots. And then suddenly, at least what most people saw was suddenly the expression of your reflection changes, and it reaches out of the mirror and grabs you by the wrist, and with a sharp tug, it sort of swings you around in kind of like a ballroom dancing move until it's on the outside and you're on the inside.
Oh.
And everything goes black. And when you wake up, you find that you are lying on a table in a dining room in the Mansion of Mirrors. The way the mansion worked, and I was thinking actually that what I might do is actually like write this scenario up properly and then release it, because it required really like very little work, and it's not actually honestly connected to anything. There were a bunch of rooms, and the rooms connected to each other like basically randomly. Whenever the players went through a door, I would roll some dice and I would be like, okay, let's pick this room, and then they would go into that room from like a door that I decided. And the fun thing about the Mansion of Mirrors is that if I'm getting this word right, some aspect of it required weird-ass lateral thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That is the words.
do you want to tell them about the bath? Because that was the first one you guys found.
We just found the Hall of Mirrors, and the bathroom was the first official room in which
In which a weird lateral thinking puzzle happened.
there was a tiled room, and down the corridor in front of us, there was like the door that we came into completely disappeared. That was a theme throughout the entire thing. And the only way out was down this small corridor, in which at the end of it, the door was absolutely tiny, and you could only probably get your arm through there.
We're talking like cat flap size.
Yes. And there was, the only thing in this room was this large bubble bath with massive bubbles coming out of it and just popping on the ceiling. This actually stumped us for quite a while.
It did, and I think like the reason for that was because it was the first of such puzzles you'd found, so you weren't really like thinking along the right lines.
In the end, it turned out that it was a perception trick. We had to magnify the door. And so eventually we managed to figure out that if we took one of the large bubbles that were coming out of the bathtub and held it in front of the tiny door at a certain point, like not too close and not too far away, the door would be magnified to a normal size and we could step through it.
But you stepped through it through like the space of your perception of the door, so that
Exactly.
was like, through the bubble.
Yes.
Which was really weird. And it's like this is the recurrent theme in the Mansion of Mirrors, is perception rules. Things are how you perceive them. I think like the wiki page is like the works of MC Escher are the kind of thing where it's like impossible things can happen so long as you can perceive of them happening.
This room made me laugh quite a lot because every time we tried to do something, you would have the Dwarven fighter
so
make a wisdom save.
Grabthar, right? So Grabthar, this was not what the fear mechanic was supposed to be about, right? Like the fear mechanic, originally I intended specifically to come up once at the end of the scenario, but because Rex had chosen for Grabthar to be like to have his resolve tested every single time something weird or unexplainable happened. Every time somebody did weird-ass logic, like magnifying a door in a soap bubble so that it was big enough to walk through or something like that, he had to make a wisdom save, and every wisdom save that he failed, he took psychic damage.
I love it. I love how it's just like something strange happens. No, fuck this, I'm out.
Exactly.
I think later on you guys found out that you could give him advantage on his next save against something weird happening by making him drink.
Yes.
Like, as long as he drunk, he'd have advantage on the next...
August had a flask of alcohol, which she just passed to Grand 4 to make himself feel a little bit better here.
Yeah.
And to give him advantage on wisdom rolls.
So, a little later on is when you guys first came across XXIII.
Yes.
So, you haven't met any monsters yet here, but you go into a room, and the room is sort of kind of like, I guess, a bar of some sort, except there's no bar. It's just a whole load of, like, tables, like in a coffee shop, but with, like, chairs around them. Mm-hmm. And sitting on one of the chairs, there's this tiefling nerd.
Yes.
Like, let's not mince words here. XXIII is a nerd.
He had cute little glasses on, and he was...
Like, he was wearing, like, a shirt and a bright maroon tunic. But if you imagine him in, like, almost like in a turtleneck sweater, like, that's the sort of thing that XXIII would wear. And he had, like, tiny little, like, circular spectacles.
And let's not mince words, he was adorable.
Yeah, he talked really nervously. He was frightened of the party when they first came in until he realised that they were not like the monsters that he'd seen.
And so, he was just very endearing as a character.
Like, XXIII introduces himself and he's like, I'm a doctor.
Yeah.
You know?
I can help in any way I can.
I'm a medical doctor. I'm not really one for fighting, but I've had to learn quickly in this horrible place. You promise you're not monsters.
Yeah, so we calmed him down, and we all decided to turn our 3-man group into a 4-person group.
Yeah. So they took XXIII with them, and XXIII helped because, like, XXIII sort of acted as, like, the character from the video game who, if you're spending too long to complete the puzzle, he starts, like, making, like, pointed comments, almost as if he doesn't understand what he's saying.
I don't remember him actually, like, ever making any pointed comments.
Well, not really pointed comments.
He was really nice about everything.
Like, I think a couple of times he did, but you were mostly fast enough with the puzzles after that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I was not actually expecting, like, XXIII to be so over as a character. Like he seemed to genuinely endear himself to everyone who talked to him. Like he was nervous, but I think it was he never made a nuisance of himself, because in combat he was like, he had a very low damage output, but he kept rolling, like, really good rolls, and so he'd be like, no, and he warned them, because when they started fighting these doppelgangers, what they found is that, like, the doppelgangers had a very limited pool of reference as to what the people they were supposed to be impersonating looked like. So everyone, like, looks like a Picasso painting. And those are the good ones. Like, they have, like, high definition eyes and stuff on them. Like, a lot of people, like, look just sort of like a cauliflower with fists.
Yes.
Or something like that. But he was the first to point out that the longer you spend fighting these creatures, the more they learn about how to look like you.
And then he proceeded to start singing completely out of tune the warning to us. He was
like, I am the real me, pay attention to where I am in the battle. So to try and avoid the whole shoot him, he's the clone.
Yes.
Kind of trope. So you guys went through a bunch of rooms.
Oh yeah, so many rooms,
including one that I added during the game after a comment that Maxi made as Cylvestra.
Yeah.
Cylvestra. And no, it just seemed that people were genuinely, like, endeared to XXIII, because I think Cylvestra liked him because he was
a scholar.
Yeah. He was a scholar, and he was very polite. Mm-hmm. You know, he was a little timid, but he knew how to talk to people. And his story, I think, was that he'd been part of an archaeological expedition
from Rulend into the Elven Empire,
a secret one, and then they'd hidden in a cave from a storm, and the cave had a perfectly still pool in it.
And he bent over to drink.
He bent over to drink from it, and his reflection had reached up and pulled him in. Like that was his story. And I think I think August liked him because like he was like, yeah.
He was
Go
getting involved. That's why August.
Because Arcturus was like getting a whole load of good hits off against the horrible monsters and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
so August actually handed him a hand axe and said, like, here, we'll upgrade you with this.
Yeah, like August liked teaching Arcturus how to use this hand axe. I can't remember why Grabthar liked him, but I'm pretty sure that he did as well. So you go through like a bunch of rooms, and there's like puzzles like a tiny doorway on a table, and you've got to sort of like duck behind the table to make the door the right size.
Yep.
And a pair of doorways that you have to like match up 2/3 of a door jamb with the other third, which is on like the opposite wall, and you look around a corner in order to like get them to line up and stuff like that. There was one that you never saw, which Niall actually called ahead of time, which is that there is a square room with a mirror diagonally across it and 2 doors, like one on like the south and one on the west, but the reflections in the east and the north are also doors that you can like walk through if you believe, and stuff like that. But and all this time, by the way, like all of this stuff that they find, every time they see something weird, like really weird, like for instance the windows out onto the storm, where if you smash them you realise they're mirrors.
Yeah.
Like, they don't actually lead
anywhere. And there's
anywhere.
just a wall behind them.
There's just a wall behind them. Every time something weird happened, that's another wisdom save for Grabthar, who may or may not be tanked up with alcohol.
Yeah, I think Colvestra did more healing for him on his as a result of what he was doing to himself than anything else.
There was a time as well where, like, Grabthar was the first to figure out a puzzle, and he was like, okay, no, I can do this. I'm going to like go through the door first. I'm going to use the fucked up logic of this place. And I was like, oh, this is a really important save, because if you make this save, then like Grabthar becomes the master of this format, and he loses the effect of his fear on like anything that the mansion can throw at him. And unfortunately, he failed that save. And instead, what he got was like, oh my god, I'm becoming one of them. That kind of thing.
Poor Grabthar.
So in the penultimate room, because I made you guys wander around like a bunch of the same rooms in like weird succession.
And I got you to accidentally draw in a library after my character.
Because Colvestri asked Arcturus if there was a library, and I was like, maybe there is a library, and so I got Arcturus to be like, well, I haven't seen one, but I'd very much like to there to be a library. I tell you, it's so good to meet a fellow scholar.
Yeah, and then they found a library.
They found a library, and the library puzzle was really, really circuitous, I will admit that now. What you had to do is you found 2 rows of books, like 2 shelves of books, with different coloured books on them, and you pushed books out of the front shelf in order to make a door shape in the negative space, with like the lighter brown books behind, and then you went and got a book with a gold volume number, and put it in like one of the shelves in order to act as a door handle. Then you went up the ladder on the opposite bookshelf and opened the door. It was
really, really good that you thought of that on the fly.
Okay, that's fair. But I feel like Arcturus could probably have given you a little bit more help with that one. But Colvestri distracted Arcturus because Maxi wanted Arcturus to be sort of kind of involved in what Colvestri was trying to do in this library. And the library is like where they find like the really disturbing thing, where like the books towards the beginning of the library are just like random gibberish, and then towards the end of the library, it's like they use really simple sentence constructions, but these are like words, understandable words in common, describing actual things. And so it's worrying because it's like they're learning. That sort of thing. And then finally they get into the penultimate room, and the penultimate room is a theatre. Mm-hmm. It's a round room, and it has those stepped like, you know, well, you know what the inside of a theatre looks like when it's just got benches, right?
Yeah.
That's what it looks like. And the middle of the room is dark, and so they go down the steps, and when they get to the middle of the room, a light turns on, and they find out it's not a musical theatre, and it's not it's not a theatre for actors in a round.
Yeah, no playwrights there.
It's a Victorian surgical theatre, and there is a chair, like a sort of like a dentist's chair in the middle, and on this chair is I believe the phrase that I used was surgically eviscerated
Yes.
body of Archrus Vath. And this is the point, because they'd worked this out before. You were quite clever before. They'd worked out, okay, we need a code word to like prove that we're us. And Archrus was like, that won't work because I think these monsters can read minds.
So...
But they can only copy what they can see. So if we hide an object on our person, we can like pull the object out to show this. And they used pitons, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was a thing that August happened to have. And so they're like, Archrus, do you have your piton? And Archrus like basically pulls the piton out, and he's like, you know, the piton only works if I was the real Archrus Vath when you gave it to me. And so, like, a boss fight begins where Archrus Vath reveals that the real Archrus Vath has been dead, basically, since these guys arrived.
And all of a sudden became the most sinister heel I have ever seen in my life.
I was really surprised that all of you guys were really enthusiastic for him as a villain. Like bad Archrus was just as over as good Archrus in, like, an entirely different direction. Because he... What was his line that Niall complimented me about? All right, so he was like, I'm trying to see if I can do his line. He was like, I feel I'm really sorry that I didn't tidy up. Like you know, when he's talking about Archrus's like body, he's like, but once I heard that you were coming, I just had to rush out. And then he talks about how basically he tortured and interrogated the real Archrus in order to like learn all his mannerisms perfectly and stuff like that. And then he talks about how he actually feels really bad about the whole thing because halfway through the interrogation, Archrus taught him about like the guilt of imposing on people. And then suddenly like not Archrus is like, oh my god, because he basically had to rip the language of common from the real Archrus's mind before he could start interrogating him. And he's been like, you know, just torturing him for hours. And he's like, man, this is really impolite. I feel really bad about this. And I think, like, yeah, toward when the fight's about to start, he's like, poor Archrus taught us a lot, but evidently there's still much to learn, and we can learn that from you. Although we already know about screaming, so you don't have to start with that. And then two other doppelgangers like come out of the shadows.
And I honestly loved that line the most. And if you weren't gonna say it, I was gonna poke you to make you say it because the screaming part that was genius.
I actually thought of that line pretty early on, and like I spent a few minutes walking to the SU, like trying to be like, how does that work best, basically, as a villain line. But here I think is where we drop the hammer, because all the way through this boss fight, on either his turn or hers, Archrus, well, I suppose not Archrus at this point, because the real Archrus is also present. It's just that his face is contorted into an eternal scream, and he's been cut from sternum to
Breastbone?
the breastbone, I guess, and his organs are all in jars, except some of them which are missing, which is worrying. And he's like strapped to this table. Yeah, he's very dead. So I guess not Archrus is prancing about, and not Archrus's angle, basically, for taunting the party is he's like, I knew that I could infiltrate you, because one of our own has been in your midst this whole time, and you never even noticed. And like August and Grabtha are like, what the fuck's he talking about? And then Archrus starts addressing Culvestra like directly, and he's like, "Why do you deny your birthright, child?"
And it's at this point I'm going to talk about Culvestra's secret. Culvestra is not a doppelganger, but is the if you look in the monster manual, you see that some doppelgangers like to exclusively
well, it's like they're too hedonistic to raise their own young, right? So
yeah,
they're like
so
cuckoos.
they lie with human women, and they're young when they're young will be human up until they reach a certain point of maturity.
Or elves or dwarves or whatever the original mother was.
Upon which they will become what their father was, and this also pertains to not just them losing their form, but also like their original mindset and their emotions. And
they become
whatnot.
doppelgangers. Basically.
Yeah,
this is how new doppelgangers are made in the material plane.
Yeah, and cool.
So like the way I ruled this was like most of the change is like mindset related. So I think the way that we ruled it with Cylvestra was because Cylvestra like believes that the majority of the changes will happen on her 18th birthday. In theory, they would, because like it would be her 18th birthday, and she'd be like, "Oh no, I'm out of time," and then she would like complete her transformation.
Yeah.
But coming up to that point,
Yeah.
like, she's been like her skin has been getting like mottled and more pallid, and her eyes have been like more sunken and yellowing. And
So
stuff like that.
I made this character in like October, and I thought it would be a really interesting reason for a character to quest to figure out a way to save themselves from becoming a doppelganger.
Because Cylvestra does not want to embrace her heritage at all, does she?
No, she wants to be human.
She's really afraid of the idea of becoming like one of these horrible monsters.
Deeply afraid about it.
And in fact, that was what she wanted Arcris's help with in the library. She wanted to know if the doppelgangers had written any in-depth literature about the production of new doppelgangers using mortal women as a vector.
And whether or not there was any way the subsequent offspring could, their change could be stopped, or their time frozen in some capacity. Or just if there was a way to retain her humanity at all. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to find a book. So when this fight started, Alex and me had a very intense back and forth, as him as the not Arcris and I as Cylvestra.
To be honest, like if you hadn't described Cylvestra and what motivated her like as much as you did to me before the game, I probably would have been a little concerned, given like how much you threw yourself into like the genuine distress she was experiencing, and how much I was pressing that with Arcris, with just making him get crueler and crueler.
Yeah, because like he was really pushing her.
Because like when one of his hench doppelgangers, if you like, fell, he was kind of like, oh, now it's like the odds are even, because who knows whose side she's on. You know, she's the wild card. Maybe she fights for you, or maybe she's gonna betray you and fight for me.
And Cylvestra was very intently yelling at Arcris that I am human, and nothing you say is gonna change that. And Arcris was just very mocking of that.
Yeah, like Arcris, like, when he's revealed to be a doppelganger, like, completely changes. He gets all his doppelganger stats back, like he'd been a commoner up until that point. I'm actually amazed that when he fought other doppelgangers, he made as good rolls as he did, which was really helpful because it disguised the fact that the other doppelgangers secretly were not actually doing any damage to him, because like they were part of the long con as well. But the fight continues. I think Cylvestra like mass heals everybody once.
Yeah, she does a prayer of healing, and very effective.
And then everybody gangs up on Not Arcris, and they finally strike him down, and Not Arcris looks into Grabthar's face as he's like turning into the black goop that the doppelgangers have been shown to be reduced to, and he's like, "Just you wait, she'll take your face one day." And then he's gone.
And after the fight, I did a roll to see how Cylvestra is, and I RP'd it that she just burst into tears.
Aww.
She just...
But like the exit to the room appears, and like Grabthar, who apparently I guess is just not mentioning it or doesn't consider it important, because he saw and he heard like the cat is out of the bag.
He did do a check though during the
He did a
fight.
check during the fight, and then he completely ignored it afterwards. So I think like that was his way of being like, no, it's cool, don't worry, come on, let's go. And he's like halfway to the door, and like August is like, hey, you can't just do that. She's not okay. But like they didn't really talk very much about it at all. They were just like, it's fine.
I remember that August put his hand on Corvestra's shoulder and he said, "It's a story for another time," and motioned for her to follow them. So they were a very accepting group.
Yeah, I think that they were just like, well, that's probably as much of a final test as she could have had, you know? She was forcibly outed by this very accomplished and, in terms of like being able to fully replicate somebody, almost complete doppelganger, and she chose to fight him and kill him and heal us rather than join his side, so she's probably the closest that we have to like a trustworthy person on this side. Then they go through to the final room, and the final room is the confrontation with the ever-false king. So they go in and they find there's a big wide mirror on top of a plinth. So they walk up the plinth and they look in the mirror and they see their reflections. And August sees his reflection break out into pustules and you know,
boils,
horrible boils, and like his clothes get ratty and he's surrounded by flies and stuff, and he looks horrible. Like one eye swells shut like a giant balloon of pus. It's horrible. And Grabthar sees himself like turn into one of the like surrealist horrors that he's been fighting all the way through, and then Corvestra sees herself, and then her reflection like grins and reaches up and just like grabs a clump of her hair and just starts pulling, and like she watches her own skin like just split and slough. I believe slough is the verb. Off. And there's this bold, yellow-eyed grey creature underneath. And then you all had to make a wisdom save.
Yeah, final wisdom save.
Grabthar didn't make his.
No!
But everyone else was like, no, I won't fall for your tricks anymore.
Yeah, and Corvestra was just like, I know I've got more time. There's no way I'm letting this happen.
And then it turns out that the mirror is actually the great old one, the ever-false king. And rather than engaging him in combat, which they would almost certainly lose, they convinced the ever-false king to let them go by engaging in a contest of creation.
Yes.
With him. They gain the power to create sculpture out of like raw material. They're given some, and then they are tasked with beating him in this contest. And if you are at all a fan of the works of Garth Nix and you have read Grim Tuesday, you know what the trick is here, because the ever-false king is the creator of the doppelgangers, and his mansion of mirrors is like bad copies of things that he's seen in the material plane. Like the way that it's judged is the ever-false king can't make original things. He has to copy things that he's seen. So he makes like a really, really good painting that he's seen of the emperor of elves, and then August made a
fruit basket.
A fruit basket, and Grabthar made a sword with like lettering on it.
Didn't he put the story of the hungry
Yeah,
caterpillar
it was
on
a
it?
very hungry caterpillar, which was a weird thing to inscribe on it, but you know. And then what did Corvestra make?
Well, I felt that Corvestra would make something that would be a testament to what she believes it makes a human a human. So she decided to take one of her own memories, the memory of remembering a bard once playing music in front of people. So she made a sculpture of this bard with his musical instrument and the people gathered around it. And then she conceptualized the music as colours and an embroiled story around him and around the heads of people. And upon each person it touched, it evoked new colour and to represent new emotions that were being felt. And I just felt like that was something that Corvestra would probably create to just show what humanity is.
And indeed, the doppelganger judge that the king had brought in and instructed very sternly to be completely impartial, because this should be a fair contest, because he's an evil cosmic horror of his word, decided.
Sorry, I just like the idea of this doppelganger coming in and just like sitting there and judging the art, like. Fuck.
That's like whatever you're imagining. That is probably what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just like stared at the art pieces and then like shook its head or nodded its head, and it chose Colvestri's like contribution because of how original it was. And so, defeated, the Everfalls king is like, well, there's no harm really in letting two mortals go from my domain, and this misguided child will no doubt be back at some point. No, she'll come round. Let kids be kids.
Yeah.
So he allowed them to go back, and they went through a mirror that came out to the reflective surface of the fountain in the middle of Varash's capital's town square. And that was the end of the scenario. So I think the only thing that was not resolved at the end is that there are like two doppelgangers wearing Grabthar and August's faces just walking around somewhere.
Yeah.
But not Colvestra's, because that was the bit that we hid, was that her way of entering the mirror was different. She just found that she could step through the mirror during this thunderstorm.
Yeah, I Alison looking last it.
Yeah.
Actually, the idea of like Grabthar going home and there's another Grabthar like eating a sandwich or something, and then Grabthar has to take yet more psychic damage.
I believe that the way that it was ruled was that if he was expecting the weird thing, he got advantage on the roll. So that's probably how I would have ruled it then. Like he would come in and he'd be like, I knew that there was going to be another me, so I get advantage on this roll that I'm still probably going to fail.
Yes. His combat rolls did really, really well, but his wisdom rolls
They were not great. Like his wisdom bonus, as far as I know, was not great, but also he just rolled really badly. Like Rex was not rolling well for those checks. So, those I guess are the 3 games that I say 3 games. We played a lot of stuff on the QCon weekend, but those are the games that we wanted to talk about on the post QCon report.
Mm-hmm.
So guys, what have you learned this QCon?
What have we learned this QCon? I've learned, I think, and I feel that I am entitled to say that I've learned it this QCon, because although I did get a feeling like this last QCon, I wasn't truly able to identify what it was. I really, really like introducing people to new things that they can get excited and enthusiastic about and have fun.
Yeah.
And I love how like QCon lets me do that. I've also learned that it's okay if I can't exceed what I've done before every time, as long as I try and keep the quality of what I've done up. Because I found it was a lot like nicer when I stopped trying to be like, what can I do that tops what I did last year, and just be like, what can I do that's interesting?
Mm.
Like, it doesn't have to be as good as last year's, so long as it's still got that mark of what I like to bring to QCon. And what, like, I've generally got very positive feedback from Ali, who runs, who I don't know if she will continue to run RPGs at QCon. I feel possibly Rex is going to take over from that, or somebody else. I don't know quite how the relationship between the people who run QCon and the people who normally run Dragon Slayers works. But Ali was running it this year, and she was really enthusiastic about people bringing weird stuff to QCon. And I was like, no, I love doing that, and I will always try and bring like some sort of strange experiment to QCon if I can. No, I really, really enjoy doing that, and I think this is the first year where I've pinned down that that's actually what makes me so happy about that experience. Definitely. I guess I've also learned that I have no idea what it is that I put into characters that makes them go over, as I believe the Wrestlemans say. Because
That is what they say.
Because I wanted Arcris to be sympathetic, but I have no idea like why, compared to other similar characters that I've made, he was so sympathetic in the eyes of like all of the people playing, and why even when he turned out to be a horrible monster, that horrible monster was in a completely different way considered a great villain by those same people. Mm-hmm. So I guess I just have to keep trying, and I will figure it out one day probably. What about you, Maxi? What did you learn this QCon?
I learned that I have to queue up an hour beforehand if I want to get into any of your games.
Yeah, they filled up really quickly. Like I a couple of people actually told me that my games filled up very, very quickly, which made me very proud, but also very concerned because I like people who are, unsure a bit to like be able to come and play in my games, and it kind of seemed like they were just very popular.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, another thing that I've learned, and I forgot to mention this while I was talking about my games. So, I don't know if I've mentioned these on the podcast before, but a company called Gale Force 9 makes a set of spell cards. This is an official Wizard of the Coast tie-in product. Like, Gale Force 9 are not a Wizards company, but they have the official license to do this. The cards are not perfect, but what they are essentially is they are all of the spells from a given spell list. And, like, you look through the cards and it'll be like, there's a card for, say, on the Clerics, you've got a card for Aid, and a card for Cure Light Wounds. Like, every single spell that is on, like, any of the Cleric spell list. I believe it's a separate one for, like, domain spells. There are quite a lot of different decks. So there's, like, there's even some for, like, things that aren't spells, but which are, like, special abilities. Like, I believe there's a set for the Fighter Battlemaster's special abilities, which will, like, come as, like, little things. Anyway, point I'm making is, for events like QCon, those are great. They're fantastic, because when I would run games at QCon before, I'd be like, I can only really have one spellcaster, or maybe two, provided I get them to sit next to each other, because I can't guarantee that everybody is going to have their own book, and, like, people have to pick spells out of the book. The spell cards are so good, because you're just like, okay, you guys, here is a stack of spell cards for this class, go through. I've taken out the ones that are not too high level for your character ever to have. Just pick the spells you want. I've already explained to you the rules of how you pick spells, and then just have those on hand as a reference. And I also found that printing off photocopies of, like, the relevant pages of the PHB was also really, really helpful, just because the more resources that you provide, like, where it's relevant resources, so, like, not even providing, like, insurance against people not having their own, like, books, but if you're just like, here is the page that is relevant to what you're trying to do here, like, you put that in, and that's really, really helpful. So, as I said, I don't know, like, how similar things that you might want to go to in your area are to the experience that we have at QCon, but I think definitely if you're unsure whether, like, you might have some people playing in your games who have never played an RPG before and who don't have the material and are confused about stuff, spell cards and photocopies of the relevant parts of the PHB, for like, the table of progression, for instance.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Those are really, really good resources, and I very much recommend them for this kind of thing. So, yeah, that was the bit I forgot. I'd meant to say something about that when I was talking about my game, but that's a practical thing that I learned.
I mean, I have some myself, and they are incredibly useful.
They're really, really useful, definitely. Like, I got them, like, a while ago, and they were reasonably useful for, like, quick reference when we were, like, doing our game. Like, when I play Azrael, I try and have all of the spells that I have selected.
I also have the monk ones for Coslin.
Yeah. And I'm like, these are reasonably good. It means I don't have to, like, look through my raggedy PHB with pages falling out every single time. But I don't know if they were worth the money I paid for them. And then I took them to QCon, and I was like, these are amazing. Because now I can have so many spellcasters in my pre-gens if I want. I can make, like, pre-gens for the druid and the sorcerer and the warlock, who previously were way too complicated ever to do that. And now I can. It's so good. Like, the full spectrum is available now because you've got these aids for people, and it's just good. Well, I also learned that I probably should not leave making pre-gens until the last minute, and I feel like you learned that as well, Maxi, because I heard a little birdie told me that you were, like, last minute you didn't quite get your pre-gens all done, and some people had to fill in, like, the last bits themselves.
I know. It was the...
And you judged me for liking coleslaw. Shocking.
That doesn't have anything to do with this. You're still an abomination for liking coleslaw.
No, you are! It's lovely with chips. And...
I only didn't get the cleric and the druid complete. I started them. I brought their hit points up. I did the ability score modifier because it was level 6 campaign. But I just didn't write down all the equipment. But I put all the spells in. I put all the spells that they would use, but just not the equipment that they might want and what each of the what they could do at level 2 or level 4 that was just handy to have on. So I just said to them, look, instead of just looking in the sidebar, just go through the player's handbook. It's on the table for you.
You want as much game time as you can get in this kind of event, so preparation time is very important. And coleslaw is still a garbage food for garbage people.
No, it's not. It's tasty with chips. You know what? It goes great with pulled pork as well. You put it in a pulled pork sandwich, it is delicious. Okay. I had it with steak last night, also very nice.
Pulled pork is not unpleasant, but it is weird.
It is.
Like
but
it is a weirdly textured food.
It is, that's true. But do you know what makes it better? Putting even more weird textures in there.
You have two people sitting next to each other who are completely unconvinced about this.
There must be someone here who likes coleslaw in the comments.
If you like coleslaw and you are willing to defend its honour, then please write to us at probably nobody gives a shit, because this episode is already 2.25 hours long at time of recording. Belfast. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's us.
Yeah,
it is. Yeah, We've been House of Bards.
We have been House of Bards. I have been Alex.
The music was by Kevin MacLeod.
Okay, this person that we're talking to doesn't actually exist. You're having a hallucination. It's just me and Maxi sitting in front of a microphone here. We're actually talking to the Skype test robot. We're trying to figure out whether our collective
it's just been a great conversation between you and me and no one else.
Yeah,
I've been
that's
Beth.
a lie. Yeah, this
this is Beth.
and our lovely guest this episode has been Maxi.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Any future time that we need an enthusiastic guest such as yourself, I thought you did very well. We might ask you to come on again. Obviously, you're not always in the same physical space as me, so there are times that it might be a little harder.
Yeah.
But definitely, I would say that this is probably not the last you have heard of Maxi on the podcast. So you can find us on various the social medias. We should do that.
Yeah.
So I am Cleaver Crummish. It's spelt in the description on Twitter, Tumblr, and on Twitch as well.
Yeah. I'm Baroness Banff on Twitter, Tumblr, and Twitch.
Yeah.
The 3 Ts.
Yes, but both of us stream pretty regularly. I was not able to get a Sunday stream out on the weekend of QCon because I was exhausted. Turns out doing 4 games with all the appropriate preparation is actually kind of hard. Although, as I've said to other people, I do wish that I'd done a 5th one, because then on my rewards sheet for helping the staff with their job, it said that I could have been eligible for a free QCon T-shirt subject to availability, and that would have been nice to get. Although I was still allowed into the post QCon staff kind of restaurant thingy without wearing such a T-shirt, so it seems like we got away with it.
We didn't. You had to pay for it.
And
That's true, but we were allowed to be there, which apparently some people were not. In any case, yes, we stream reasonably regularly. I stream on Thursdays and Sundays.
and I stream on Fridays and Saturdays.
And I watch both of these streams.
Yes, so
Yes,
while you
Cat
probably
returns
can't see
this
Maxi's face on a stream, you can probably interact with her in one of our chats if you come and watch one of our streams. So yeah, Beth, you are currently playing popular alt otome game Hustle Cat, aren't you?
Yeah, I actually really enjoyed it. It's probably one of the better ones in this weird niche genre there is. Yeah.
Whereas I am not quite sure what I'm playing. I think I'm going to continue playing Return to Castle Wolfenstein on Thursdays, because I really love that game, and it scrubs up pretty well when you give it some graphics mods. But as for Sundays, maybe I'll carry on playing Black Mirror, the voice actor who has never seen human beings interact with each other simulator. Or maybe I'll play something else, who knows. In any case, it'll be out of date as a prediction by the time this episode goes up, because even though there's not a lot of editing to do, I still haven't edited the previous one. Very well then, so that has been us, that has been House of Bards. I have no idea what the background image behind the text is, so look in the description for a credit for that. I promise it will not be something as horrifying as the image that we used for the episode about Mary Sue's. I'm sorry for inflicting that on... No, it won't.
Oh, will it?
It won't.
Oh, will
Beth,
it?
that image was dangerously close to the barrier of fair use, and also it was fucking horrifying. I'm not going to do anything like that again. In fact, I am going to forcibly cut out any segment that includes you making predictions as to what the image is going to be, even if they are particularly relevant to the topic from now on. Just because that was so horrifying. Alright, goodbye everybody. From me, from Beth, and from Maxi.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Hi, I'm Alex. You may know me from such podcast moments as not reusing video and filming this segment again with new jokes. House of Bards, as you may know, recently turned a year old, and to celebrate that, we decided that we wanted to run a special one-shot D&D 5th edition game, DM'd by our very own Beth of House of Bards. I'm really excited about this game. Beth has come up with an amazing one-shot scenario set in an alternate universe of her 2-Earth setting, based on DC Comics' Suicide Squad. But in order to carry this off, we do need some volunteers, I guess. Some fans of the show who want to come and play with us, because currently we only have 2 players. So what we're looking for is 2 to 4 people who meet this small set of criteria. You need to be a fan of the show, aged 18 or over. You need to be willing and able to have your face, voice, and name appear on live video. Now, as to your name, that can be your real name or an alias, but if it's an alias, it has to be something that people can easily call you in casual conversation. We're going to be streaming this, and then we're going to be uploading it to the House of Bards YouTube channel, so really we need your continuous consent on the whole appearing on video thing. You need to be at least partially familiar with the rules of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, and you need a Skype account and possibly a Google account. Skype is not that good for group video calling, so we might decide to use Google Hangouts or some other non-bad software. You need to be free on Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays or Sundays between 7 p.m. and midnight Greenwich Mean Time. When exactly we're going to be running this is going to depend on the people who eventually end up getting into the game. And unfortunately, though it's very sad, we do reserve the right to reject your application if your schedule just isn't compatible with the rest of the people we've got in already. If that sounds like you, then please send me an email at this address down here. That will also be posted in the description. And include in the subject line, House of Bards Anniversary, so that I know that that is what you are inquiring about. If you can provide as much of the information that I just asked for as possible, that would make my job a lot more helpful. But yeah, let's see how it goes. I think it's going to be a really great game if we can get some people in for it. So, from me and from Beth, bye-bye.